議程第一項就係確。
It's past the time, and I call the meeting to order. Item number 1 is confirmation of minutes. The minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of December last year. Secretariat has not received any proposals for amendment. I ask members to endorse the minutes. Okay. Item 2, information paper issued since last meeting. There is none. Item 3, date of next meeting and items for discussion. For the regular meeting in March is on the 18th of March, which is a Tuesday at 2:30 in the afternoon. We will discuss firstly promotion of inward investment. Item number 1 in the list of outstanding items for discussion. And the second item for discussion is the second item on the paper, new initiative on promotion of innovation and technology. Mr. Wu, or anyone who would like to add anything or say anything? Mr. Dennis Fogg. For about the third item is scheduled to take place in the first quarter of this year is the progress report on implementation of the dedicated fund on branding, upgrading, and domestic sales. I was sent a letter by the administration dated the 15th of November. They said that, they said they were ready, but it's in the case that we don't have time. That's why it's not on the agenda for the first quarter. The administration proposed to discuss this item in the second quarter. Perhaps we will be able to deal with this in March. I will chase the administration. If possible, we will move it forward. And I'd like to say that for item 13 on the list, that is progress of the World Trade Organization Doha Development Agenda negotiations. On the 17th of January, the administration gave us an information paper, paper number bracket 1691/13 to 14 bracket 01. It reports the progress of Doha Development Agenda negotiations and 2 plurilateral agreements relevant to Hong Kong. The Secretariat has not received from members requests for discussion on this item, and I asked in the last meeting members if they would like to discuss this item. Since there is no such request, the administration asked to delete this item from the list. Do you agree? If you agree, then it will be deleted. Otherwise, we will have to make it an agenda item for discussion. It will be deleted then. Item 4, comprehensive review of the Innovation and Technology Fund, proposed improvement measures. Yes? Overseas visits. For Israel, I think the clerk and the relevant parties are working on the details. Once it's ready, we will discuss it. Mr. Wong Ting Kwang, on the list of items for discussion, perhaps as soon as possible, we need to discuss about the incident that took place in Canton Road last Sunday. For tourism, it's supposed to be under another panel. But when it comes to setting up of commerce and business and shopping centers near the border, we need to be involved as well. I think we're all very concerned about that incident. Perhaps I would discuss with Mr. Michael James Tian, the chairman of the Economic Development Panel. This also touches economic development under the purview of Mr. Greg. So perhaps we can have a joint panel meeting or a special meeting. When it comes to economic development, it should not be done at the expense of Hong Kong people's livelihood. We have to urge the administration to resolve the issue. As soon as I have time, I will discuss with Mr. James Tian to see whether we should discuss it in a joint panel meeting. We will take the approach that enables an earlier discussion. This is very important. Item 4. Comprehensive review of Innovation and Technology Fund proposed improvement measures. Let me welcome the administration. The three representatives are all from the Innovation and Technology Commission. We have the Commissioner, Ms. Janet Wong, Deputy Commissioner, Mr. Joan Wong, and Assistant Commissioner, Mr. Frank Zhang. Ms. Wong, are you going to take us through the paper? First of all, I wish you a Happy New Year. Thank you. I wish you a Happy New Year as well. As we've reported previously, the ITF, the Innovation and Technology Fund, has been in place for over 10 years. In the middle of the year, we will have exhausted the committed amount. We explore areas for improvement. We started the review in the middle of last year. The fund has a very wide scope. So we report to members about the findings of our review batch by batch. And we would also sound you out for our proposed measures. We hope that we will get your support, and this is the first report of our review. You'll find in the paper the findings of the review and some proposals. In relation to the first area, is related to the application of R&D outcomes in the public sector. It was first introduced just about 3 years ago. It was thought that there were many different projects, innovative projects, and we thought that they could be put to use in the public sector, say for example in the government departments, public bodies or trade associations. The results are encouraging. We have about 80 trials of different scales being put to use in the public sector. You'll find the examples in the paper. We do think that the outcome is positive. And still, we would like to propose some minor improvements. First of all, currently there are two different ways to start the project. We call those in use in a public sector platform project, which requires 10% of sponsorship and 2 private companies involved. We think that for some projects, say for example, it's at its early stage and has yet to attract attention from the private sector, or there are projects with a limited application scope, say for example those related to customs. It may be difficult for them to get industry sponsorship, and as a result, worthy projects may not be able to commence. And we think that if there is clear support from government departments and it will benefit the community, we propose to waive the 10% industry sponsorship. Another improvement is that, well, under the current arrangement, if $100 is used, then the funding limit will be capped at $30, which is 30%. And we think that for some projects, say for example the RFID, it can be used in a warehouse or in a hospital or in a residential care home for the elderly, RCHE. And if the project is used already, then they may not be able to make another application using the technology. Well, of course, there is discretion of the commissioner, but still, we would like to increase the funding limit from 30% to 50%. Last year, the Audit Commission conducted a review, an assessment of the Innovation and Technology Commission. They have made recommendations. Say, for example, on follow-up and tracking and analysis, they are of the view that we have fallen short. And they've also made some comments about the passing mark. In response to their findings and recommendations, we have made some adjustments. And in relation to the general use, there are 4 schemes. One for R&D centers and universities. Another one is matching grants for companies and universities. The third one is related to SMEs. And the fourth one is the only support scheme for non-R&D projects. Say, for example, exhibitions, scholarships, support in research, etc. With the efforts we put in, there are a large number of such projects. In general, it is running well. But there is one limitation. Currently, the applicant itself and the related parties of the project applicant, say for example directors, are not allowed to offer sponsorship. But we think, on second thought, that sponsorship coming from the applicant or related parties is actually a good idea. And we propose to relax this restriction. Lastly is the R&D cash rebate scheme. Our report is, the figures are similar to that of last year. That is the result of our first stage review.
Thank you. Mr. Lam Kin Fong, please. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to talk about the R&D cash rebate scheme. Is it included into the discussion, or do we leave it till later? Oh, I very much welcome questions. At about this time every year, we will have new data, and we would report those to you, and we would welcome your questions. Yes, Chair. In 2010, the government launched the CRS, and it's been 3 years now. Of course, when we first came up with the proposal, it was really on a tax rebate concept. It's been 3 years now. As of the end of last year, we see that there have been over 530 applications, and this is less than what I have expected. That doesn't matter as long as we can help the SMEs, because for the SMEs, what they really need is sufficient funds to do what they need to do. But I still think the number of applications is on the low side. I would like to know from the Commissioner, in terms of publicity, can we perhaps do more work there? Because I really would like to see that we proactively approach the chambers of commerce, the SME associations, and to coordinate the different government departments in using innovation and innovative technology. And I believe by so doing, in terms of interest for innovation, technology, and research, this will really help. So how can we promote and provide more publicity to this end? And also for R&D results, if we can also do some more publicity and promotions for them, that would be good. Yes, I very much agree, Chair, that promotion is very important. In the last round, in fact, we have done some major promotional activities. That was the time when we raised 10% to 30%, and we had some major campaigns in terms of promotion together with the chambers of commerce and other organizations related. And this year, in a few months' time, in the middle of the year, we expect the fund reforms to be already in place, and it will strengthen the sponsorship to the companies. And we are planning on a major publicity program conducted hand in hand with the 4 chambers of commerce and others, so as to promote the fund even further and make it even more attractive to those who are potential applicants. So do be relieved to learn that we do have such planning in place. Would the 30% be raised further? Well, we do not have this plan at present, but we believe that we have strengthened the support to the companies. And if we do not raise this any further, we will have better suggestions. Mrs. Stanley Mock. Chair, I'm looking at this first round of review, this being the first round, even though there are certain views and suggestions, however, they are small in terms of their ambitions and scale. I would like to know whether there will be a major public consultation, because as far as I know, a lot of people in the industry do not know how they can make their views known to you. In your recommendations, you have stated that, for instance, the 10% industry sponsorship can be waived for certain cases. I think this is positive, but my view would be that very often I note that a lot of people feel that IP protection is a problem. A number of cases and R&D results cannot be commercialized because of IP issues. That large payments have to be made even before commercialization. Finland, Israel, South Korea, etc. I have also asked them as to how they deal with IP rights. And they responded that the government actually doesn't care about IP rights because they expire the IP value. So anybody who can use them are welcome to use them, these IP rights. So I would like to know whether there is this policy for you. And further question concerning raising the 30% sponsorship to 50%. That is all good. I would like to know, is it because some organizations are not accessing the funding because of the 20% difference? I believe it is the case. I think the most important thing is not that they use the fund, but rather the R&D projects and the outcome are actually applied. So, as I have mentioned before, how can we extend these to the commercial sector or the private sector rather than just limit it to the public sector? the last point, SME or small enterprises sponsorship, the SIRAP situation. Now, this morning I was talking to some Singaporean persons, asking them what their Singaporean experience is. They told me that they do not sponsor, the government do not sponsor corporations, but rather the project. For example, they feel that there are certain products which should be sponsored, for example, cloud application. As long as your project is within this realm, there will be sponsorship from the government. And of course, you will have to say what staffing you need, what the capital is for. Of course, you cannot get the funding to buy your own car. But they do not care. The government doesn't care about the corporation. Really, it cares only about the project. But CRAP is different. You are looking at the corporation as a base, and you even ask for matching grants to be obtained. So I would like to ask whether there will be sponsorship mode whereby you disregard the corporation, but of course there are major listed companies which are huge, and you do not have to take those into account. But would you really be considering the projects rather than the corporation? And this loops back to the audit review comments about bankruptcy of certain companies, etc. But really the situation may be there are mature or relatively mature companies which want funding for further research on certain projects. Can we not sponsor those projects as such? There are a few questions there, Chair. I will try my best to answer them all. First of all, for public entities, is it true that without the 20% going up to 50%, that they would not apply? That is not true. In fact, as long as they think that this is advantageous, they will apply. But rather, there are situations where there are certain base technology. There are different usage for the same technology. For example, for an old age home which adopts the usage of RFID, and that uses up 90% of the R&D funding, and next time it is applied to retail, and that is another 20%, and it exceeds a 30%. And the third time round, the corporation or the entity will come to us and say, this time we want to track surgery tools, and this will be, so you're talking about repeated usage. Exactly, that is one scenario. Another scenario, there are different usages for the same technology, and the R&D center would say they want to try out the technology in different settings. But for each of the settings, they will have to set it all up, and there will be capital outlay there as well. So each would be 3 million out of a total of 10 million. So they can only set it up and do the testing in location A, but not location B, let's say. And I would say for most of the cases, 30% would suffice, but we would like to extend that further. Yes, what about the private sector? I'm sure there are certain limitations. Yes, my colleague will supplement on that later on. Deputy Commissioner. Yes, what we are doing now is to go through some chambers of commerce rather than to just provide it to company A or company B. Let's say we rate a particular company as not exactly reliable, and they lodge a case against us saying that they are not sponsored, but on the other hand, a company B is sponsored, and there may be certain ethics issues, etc. But we want to avoid all that. We go through the chambers of commerce. RFID, for example, we go through the logistics association, and through the logistics industry association, they can distribute the funds to 10 companies within their membership, rather than for us to face few hundreds of these logistics companies. And also we may attract complaints as to why him and not me. Also, for IP, we have very clear stipulations apart from the company which provides which is provided 50% or above, the usage, of course, is for that company itself. But for other platform projects and technology, we really welcome wider usage. Mr. Wang will explain that further. Mr. Mok, as for small enterprises support, it is true that it is not ideal, the present arrangement. We are doing major surgery there. You raised just now that apart from looking at the corporation, the projects, we should not be overly focused. We have received complaints really to say that it had been too focused and too piecemeal. Perhaps we should extend it to cloud computing, for instance, cloud technology, make it wider. And in the next few months or so, very soon, on the basis of overall and comprehensive support for corporations, we will draft a specific paper to come up to the LegCo again, and we'll be responding to your question, Mr. Mok, one by one in that paper. Yes, Mr. Wang, then. Thank you, Chair. Concerning IP, I think Mr. Mok's question has two legs to it. One, I think your question really hinges on if there should be any application for IP protection. Well, actually, if I may clarify, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, but for the R&D Center, if they have come up with certain R&D results, they want to commercialize the results, the companies will have to pay to buy the results for application and usage. I'm asking whether there will be situations where this will be provided free of charge. Thank you, Mr. Mok, for the clarification. Under the Fund for Platform Projects and Technology, there will be 2 or more companies providing funding for investment. In the initial stage, the partner, when concluding the agreement, would have, vis-à-vis the R&D Center, would already include clauses concerning results of the R&D project, and that this funder would have priority in using the IP results, licensing, that is. So there may be certain preference or priority. So this will be the first mover advantage in a sense. And the outside third party, a company, which may find the results interesting, we at present allow for non-exclusive licensing. And the conditions may be discussed with the R&D Center, and for these non-exclusive licensing rights, it would not be overly expensive. For example, if at the initial stage the company is already an R&D partner, then there will be an initial agreement even at the start for this preference usage.
When it comes to payment of fees in the application of to register the IPR, well, I think there are some projects or some schemes under the ITF to support that. When it comes to private companies, as the Commissioner said, for our direct injection from into a private company, we were more cautious, but now through associations, councils, say for example the Construction Industry Council, trade associations, arrangements will be made for their member companies to use the technology. The CIC has some cooperative projects with us about the safe use of RFID by workers inside construction sites. There are some R&D projects being launched in this area. When I think there are some more issues to be further explored with you in the next stage. And how are you going to approach the second stage? Will it be made public? I was asked what we are going to do. Well, what we did, first we dug out all the information and data to see if there are past examples and information of cost effectiveness, and we invited people from the relevant trades to exchange views with us. We have workshops on, say, for example, commercialization of the result. A few years ago, we extended the ITF to the public sector. Some people are of the view that that is not enough. It has yet to reach the market. But how wide are we going to expand the scope, and how we are going to bring that about? We explore these issues in the workshops. We've invited people from universities to attend as well. We ask the trade to give us their views, because we don't want to just work behind closed doors. Mr. Chung Kwok-pan, the Commissioner mentioned that for some projects they are not able to get 10% industry sponsorship. Maybe for these projects, they are at an early stage. And for such projects, the sponsorship from industry may be waived. But if there is no interest from the industry, how can the public sector make sure that it will be feasible? And in paragraph 20 is the way forward. About the 5 billion plus interest, about 7 billion. How much does the Commission reckon it will need for the future? In 20A, it talks about how to encourage and facilitate more private sector investment in R&D. Some people say that you will have to offer them tax concessions or land concessions to attract more private investment. And how are you going to do it? B, it says how to strengthen our support for commercialization of R&D outcomes. Of course, that itself is very important. If you cannot commercialize it, then it will be of no use. And you mentioned about intellectual property rights. What about IP trading? There are many IPRs from the many R&D centers. The administration has been talking about IP, turning Hong Kong into an IB trading hub. And how are we going to bring that about? Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chung. Trial schemes in the public sector. You say that if there is no commercial value, then in the end it will be worthless. That is not the case. Sometimes there is an issue to be tackled for a department, say sewage treatment. The department is aware of some technology being used overseas, and the department also knows about similar projects being conceived in the universities, and they may approach the university to ask them to start the project. It may be about the prevention of the burst of a pipe. For such projects, a private company may not be willing to inject funds into this project at such an early stage. And there are cases when 6 months has been spent on getting industry sponsorship, and in the end it was futile. Let me give you an example. Say law enforcement. Well, apart from the government, no one will be doing correctional services. Say the police. They maintain law and order, and that is taken up by the government, and they will need technology. We want to promote the use of technology in the government. We offer financial support. We know R&D people. We would like to encourage them to start the R&D projects. Very often they cannot get the sponsorship, and as a result the project cannot start. We don't want that to be the only reason why an otherwise effective project cannot start. About IP, Mr. Wong will supplement. Tax concessions. We are the Information and Technology Commission. I'm not in a position to answer, but for intellectual property, Mr. Wong will supplement. Thank you. IP trading. There are two views. The owner, that is the creator of the IP, and afterwards the platform for trading of the IPAR. We have some R&D centers. We support academics to embark on R&D projects, and we have created a lot of IPs. Say, for example, for the Applied Science Institute. You will find the information on the internet about what intellectual property rights they have. It's a TCL. I can name it. Telecommunications company has actually purchased the IP, and the proceeds has been plowed back into the ITF. And as to whether there will be a place for the IP to be put to actual use, the Intellectual Property Department, which is our sister department, actively looks into such issues. And my understanding is that there are some proposals for trial use with other commissions and departments. Well, I mentioned about the projects. Well, it takes someone to know about this, to in the field, to know about the existence of such property rights. The IPD is doing their work, and for us, our commission, we give our input. Just now the commission mentions about investments on R&D projects. Do you have any measures to encourage private investments? For the for syrup, the amount is 6 million, and it's a matching grant, a matching grant. There are conditions. It should involve third-party investments, and the amount given should be paid by installment back to us. But we have to consider whether 6 million is enough. It is a huge load for us to follow the cases. Well, we work on the prototype and is used in the public sector. But it's difficult to expand the scale. There are still a lot of difficulties to be overcome once the prototype is produced and used. For the different trades, there are different requirements. We are currently looking into the sufficiency of the scope. We don't want our hands tied. We want to give ourselves more flexibility, but the issue itself is quite complicated. We will only put everything in place after we have discussed with the experts. We have pulled all the plugs out already. Mr. Wang Ting-Kwang, the Deputy Commissioner mentioned about the 4 major chambers of commerce. Should it be limited to just the 4 chambers of commerce? I know that there are lots of associations and companies who are interested. Well, that is actually not the case for logistics. A lot of companies at SMEs, they need logistics. Our center actively participate in the relevant trade discussions with the logistics companies. Now that's just something I felt like saying. I know that that is not the case. About the uncommitted fund is about $1 billion, and you think that by 2015 it will be all used. So we're talking about next year. So when the $1 billion is exhausted, do you have any plans to continue the funds and the various schemes? Is there any need for you to come back to the LegCo for funding application for injection into the fund? If the results are encouraging, would you consider continuing? We keep a close eye on the accounts. We have to go through the procedures before we can make a decision. Promotion of innovation and technology cannot stop. The comprehensive review will complete by the end of this year, calendar year. If necessary, we will make applications for funding, but it's not for me to decide. I hope members will give us your strong support. This government is working on the setting up of a new bureau. When the new bureau is set up, will this fall under the purview of the bureau? Whether the policy will continue, I would like to know.
Yes, the CE in his policy address has already mentioned this, and the government has already made it clear that there will be this technology bureau. As for the Commission, I think reasonably should become a part of the future technology bureau. And definitely the government's stance of supporting science and technology will not swerve. Yes, I think Chair Mr. Wong Ting Kwang had asked some of the questions that I wanted to ask. It's about assessment, first of all. In fact, it's been 15 or 16 years, Mr. Lam had donated this $5 billion, and it is quite depleted, and the government may have to come back for funding. Our party is in support. The only question is, how do we go about it? In fact, I agree that this is very challenging work. It's very difficult to be very good at it and to be seen to be fair without attracting criticism that there are certain preferences, etc. But on the other hand, why would anybody innovate if the whatever it is, the innovation does not exist in the first place? Perhaps no one wants it. But if everybody wants it when the product is out, then of course you make a huge load of money. But what we are doing now is to provide a product that is unique and no one else has it. But what you are doing is going through the councils or the chambers of commerce. Everybody knows about it. And what happens? Well, perhaps they will go for projects which they may want to support, and also to throw out certain possibilities, quote unquote. Let me think. The Google CEO, some time ago, a question was put to him. There are 3 barges outside in the port of San Francisco, and he was asked as to what the barges were doing there. What I'm trying to say is that whatever is lucrative, you would want to develop it to a certain mature stage before you make it public. Now, therein lies a quandary. You do not make it public in the initial stage. And while everybody knows about it, there will be less incentive to develop it. So I would say the route of review should take the following. And that is, how can we help the companies develop their products in a very confidential, secret way? so that in the future when they come to the market with a product, they will make a lot of money. And of course, you would want them to. Otherwise, you'll be criticized. I mean, this is a circular story, and I'm sure you have considered this before. In your round of comprehensive review, perhaps you should go back to basics, in the sense that you should determine whether you're helping the corporation, individual companies, that is, or the industry, or certain projects. At the end of the day, I'm sure there will have to be different schemes. Some schemes will go through the councils and the chambers of commerce. And then you also have one focused on the small enterprises. This one, I think, attracts the most criticisms. But I can tell you, this is the final objective for any businessman. Mr. Fang, our chair, you are a businessman. I'm not a businessman. But anybody who has this secret sauce, this secret element, will win out in the end. Well, actually, Mr. Sin really understands our work. Yes, it is very particular innovation. But we cannot be overly fearful and therefore do nothing. We cannot do that. So, in terms of the system, we will have to be as public as we can. For example, we come to the LegCo, we explain how the entire mechanism works, and for a company which has or provides 70% of the funding, I'm sure they would want to be able to commercialize and apply the results of the R&D right away and be able to reap the benefits from that. Our R&D centers, very often, when they start a project, if in the initial stage it is not a very practical one, they will start off with a platform technology project, so that when it reaches a certain stage of maturity, some corporations, upon noticing them, may come and sponsor. And they would, at that instance, request for IP usage and licensing, and more often than not, we will grant them. But on the other hand, we do not give it out or sell it out, the IP licensing, because otherwise, at the end of the day, we become an agent and no more than an agent. We need to have our own portfolio as well. So we all have to understand what the usages are. Some of the utilities are social, community, and they are not really for money-making. And there are others which are money-making. You will have to protect the rightful profitability of those companies. And in our system, we do take all these into consideration. Mr. Sin, I thank you for being so understanding, but I think we really must not worry too much. We come to you clean as to how we go about it, and of course what is confidential to a company, we do not publicize it, otherwise we will not be able to go through with certain projects. But as long as we are clear with you, members, as to what we do, and we are fair and just and transparent with our companies in everything, then I think we should not be overly worrisome. Thank you. Mr. Goh Hung? Yes, Chair, concerning UICP, because this is not very not laid out in detail concerning the university industry collaboration program. The paper doesn't talk about successful cases and any of the numbers and monetary figures. If you have further information, you can follow up with a paper. Now, for any private company, they will have to provide 50% of the investment before you match them. But if you look at other countries, this kind of requirement is not there. This is to encourage more universities to take up more R&D research rather than to have private participation as a prerequisite. Now, Hong Kong exactly needs to encourage universities to take up more R&D work rather than to request them or require them for initial private investment for quality and evaluation, space research, etc. It exists in other countries as well, and they're utilizing university R&D programs to see whether they are successful before they consider whether the government would provide further funding for them. Yes, thank you very much for the question. My colleague will supplement. But you were talking about industry and university collaboration. If I can explain, this program actually was introduced from the start of the ITF. It is very specific in the sense that for the universities are completely independent of the R&D centers. The 5 R&D centers cannot apply for this fund. And under this program, there are 3 sub-schemes, if you will. One is one-to-one matching grant scheme. For the university, one team in the university will work with a team of a corporation to work on, let's say, cosmetics research. This is a one-to-one matching. A second scheme is to so-called purchase the time of the professors at the university. Our universities in Hong Kong are very good. They allow for this. So they will use the professor's time, let's say a day in a week, to do the research. The third scheme would be under the professors. There are some young PhD candidates or master candidates. You would buy, so-called, or retain, rather, 1 year of his time to work on this R&D project. Yes, we have these schemes, and I can provide information after. The numbers are not big, the figures, because very often they go to the first scheme, and that is innovation technology scheme. And the universities can apply for that as well. And the advantage of that scheme is that we accept industry sponsorship in the form of in kind. For example, abalone research, we accept in kind sponsorship in terms of abalone, for instance. And last year it was very encouraging, but this year the number is lower. But that's not strange. It does fluctuate from year to year, and the companies can, as they see fit, apply for the fund. As for university, yes, perhaps the Deputy Commissioner can supplement.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kwok, for his question. As the Commissioner said, under the UICP, there are 3 schemes. One of them is more on R&D, and which is also preferred by universities, is one in the form of a matching grant, 50-50 between the government and universities. It's similar to the innovation and innovation support scheme. It's a collaborative project. This predates the innovation cooperative schemes. So if they have a team, they can choose the university government collaboration scheme. In the past 10 years, so there are about 40 to 50. In recent years, it ranges between 15 to 30 a year. It depends on whether there is any interest from universities and whether they have time. There are some successful cases, and not all information is made available on our website because it's the company that owns the IPR. For privacy reasons, we don't disclose all information. But if you're interested, we can supply the information while whiting out the company name. We would like to have the information because we want to know about the successful cases. But why do you require a private investor before they can go ahead? Why don't you encourage universities to start the projects themselves? Thank you. Well, there is a historical reason. The ITF was under the Trade and Industry Department, and back in the 90s, because of the relocation of manufacturing industries to the mainland, and they found that the name itself may be bizarre. The central idea is application of technology. It's a worthy project only when there is a market value. So apart from the general support scheme, they will require industry sponsorship to ensure that there is a market interest. Yes, but you talk about over 10 years ago. But what about now? Do we need a comprehensive review to see if the same idea applies and it's not outdated? Our proposal is to waive the 10%. Because this requirement may stop some worthy projects from starting. We're always very happy to see the Commissioner. We give her our biggest support. All we say is that they should get more money and to do more. You can see, Commissioner, that members would like you to do more and to have more flexibility. Yes, everything should be fair and open. And we want you to cooperate with the industry so that Hong Kong will excel. I believe the Commissioner will not say that he's already done very well. And I'd like to follow up on what Mr. Mok said about IP. In some countries, once it's there, anyone can use it. Is it the case that it cannot be done in Hong Kong? That's why there are so many side issues. We have struck a balance, we think. Well, if the company has put in so much, you really have to give them an exclusive right to use, whereas for others it can be opened. It's not the case that we don't allow people to use the IPs that are open. It's just that they don't know about it. We have all the information on the website, but it will be difficult for you to find the information. Say, for example, the new top. Fabric. If we do not explain in detail to you about the merit of this fabric, you will not know. We think that we should take stock of the IPs that can still be used, that still have a market value. Then we can do some more. Perhaps, Chairman, the trade can give them more input. Because apparently there are a lot of good things available, it's just that no one knows about it. We have been more active and we put in more effort. The estuary, several years ago, consolidated over 10 IPs and sold them. We are now taking stock of the IPs we have, and estuary will actively seek buyers. There is so much information on the on our website. If we compare ourselves with trade partners or neighboring countries, what's our ranking? I believe that we are not the last. We have a very low percentage, but if you look at our projects, I've seen a lot of projects in overseas countries. The ideas themselves are similar. We support not short-term projects that can be realized within a short time. Compared to our neighboring countries, yes, they have some projects that are better than that they have done better than us, but it's because of our economic structure. What do you mean? Please elaborate. Say, for example, we don't have the industry base. Say, you can within a very short time get 15 factories. Most of our manufacturing industries have moved to the mainland, and 90% of our industries are service industries, and that itself is a limitation. And we think that we have already done our best within the constraints we face. But there are some issues that I'm quite familiar with. You mentioned about the new talk fabric. Another thing is during the visit, you talk about a study, the process of dyeing fabric without the use of water. For new talk fabric, if a company put in 50% of the investments, then yes, the IP should belong to the company, but it should be subject to a time limit. Say the exclusive right to use it for 3 to 5 years. Thereafter, it will be open to all. But the new talk fabric is controlled by just 2 or 3 companies. And when the IPR expires in, say, 3 to 5 years, the use of new talk fabric should be open to all to benefit the industry. If it's limited to just 2 or 3 companies, then no one else will benefit. You should put a time limit to the exclusive use of the IP. About dyeing without water, without the use of water. I know someone who is very famous in the dyeing industry, and I talked to that person, and the person said that, well, very often it's not successful because of many factors: the pressure applied, the thickness of the steel plate. You should liaise with the industry instead of keep trying with at something that obviously will not work. Well, of course, it will be better for us to know what works and what doesn't. The chairman talks about limiting the use for a few years. That is our current use. For those on which an agreement has been signed, there is nothing we can do. But for new ones, we will limit the exclusive use to 3 to 5 years. For some projects, we have to keep the background IP for use in other areas. For the dyeing without the use of water, I have to talk to the CEO. About the exclusive use, I think, well, 3 years is an appropriate length. 5 years is on the long side. And it seems to me that you have put a lot of emphasis on dollar, on money, but you should not just look at that. You should look further, 10 or 15 years. How much is spent, what is done, how much is sold, and how many things are created. You cannot just look at 2 or 3 years because it's too short a time for innovation and technology. You need to make it clear to the Audit Commission that 2 to 3 years is too short a time for them to consider everything. And a number of members have mentioned this, including Mr. Charles Mock. A lot of youngsters create something out of nothing. They are very imaginative. You can see a lot of such examples on the internet. And some of these ideas are very profitable. Can you set aside maybe 20% of the fund for these crazy ideas? There will be some innovation. If you just follow the same course, you won't be able to find another Bill Gates. But it's been over 10 years. It's high time to see whether there is what needs to be improved. The most important policy is about the beneficiaries. We have 20%. That is our quota. Should we increase it to 25%? Should we be more generous towards the industry that is under the scope of the review as well?
If you don't think that the funds itself should be so much of a criteria, then we will make that clear in our conditions. Yes, you have heard the members. I think for your commission, it is kind of in between, in the sense that the CE has already made it clear that there will be a technology bureau. How will it play out for you and your commission in terms of your line of reporting? It is not clear yet, but I hope before all is clarified, I would want you to continue to work closely with the industry and with commercialization, and tell us where we can be of help in any way at all. Yes, definitely. I will bring your message back to my superiors. Thank you. Apart from that, I don't think there's anything else. Yes, I think we have completed the discussion for this agenda item. Thank you very much, Ms. Wang and your colleagues for coming up. We now go to the review of the Hong Kong Textiles Control System. First of all, I would like to invite the officers into the room. Yes, I would like to welcome Mr. Kenneth Mack, Director General of Trade and Industry, Assistant Director General of Trade and Industry, Mr. Jackie Lam, and also Mrs. Candy Young, Principal Assistant Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development. Yes, Mr. Mack, welcome. Will you be bringing us through the document, please? Yes, indeed, Mr. Chair. Chair, members, concerning Hong Kong Textiles Control System, we would like to maintain the necessary control to ensure access of Hong Kong textile products or exports to our major markets. We relax the TCS in tune with evolving changes to global textiles-related trade rules in 2009 and in 2011. In 2009, we relaxed the European exports, and in 2011, with most of the import and export textiles to other areas, except for the U.S., which still has this requirement. And also for U.S. manufacturers, we also need a production declaration. Now, apart from WTO members, particularly the U.S., may apply product-specific safeguard measures on mainland textiles exports. And the other products, and it is basically the same for WTO members as well as China, so there are no specific additional requirements, and therefore we do not have to have further need for control. But the situation changes. There may be protectionism. For example, in October of 2012, Mexico actually requested consultation with the mainland under the WTO dispute settlement mechanism on various measures. And import and export of textiles still remain a controversial issue in international trade negotiations. Since there is a threat of protectionism, after review, we have come up with certain proposals which are pragmatic and in keeping with the market. First of all, we want to cease the licensing and notification requirements for all textiles, imports and exports, and to cease the PN requirement for all cut and sewn garments. And in order to allow in-time reinstatement of the control, and also in view of protectionism, we would want to mothball the framework provisions for TCS currently embedded in the Import and Export Ordinance and its subsidiary legislation, and to continue the voluntary TTRS for an initial period of 3 years, and also we would be streamlining the operation. For the industry, they are using the registration process, and in the future we propose to mothball the framework provisions, and instead of repealing them, so that the administration may reinstate TCS relatively quickly to circumvent any working in terms of reenactment of the relevant provisions. And also, we will be streamlining the procedures. We expect the TTRS annual registration fee to be reduced from the current level of $349 to $61. And also, we would want to be able to react very quickly and swiftly should protectionism raise its head again. And we have already had the consent of the Textile Council, Textiles Advisory Board. Mr. Lam Tat Fai, first of all, on the control, my suggestion is that we would rather be loose than be tight, be simple rather than be complicated, be swift rather than be slow. Because I think for textiles control system, I think it has concluded its mission. Starting from 2005 with the elimination of textiles quotas globally, as long as your city or country, the production of textiles is of whatever quantity, it is unlimited how much you can export. So this kind of textile control system is meaningless. And as manufacturers move to the north from Hong Kong, and through this kind of manufacturing, the quality of textiles manufactured in China is higher and higher. In fact, the world accepts made in Hong Kong as much as it accepts made in China. In the past, made in China may connote a lower quality, but I would say that gap is narrowing if it exists at all. The U.S. and some of the European countries accept more and more the made in China products. Now, because of various reasons, such as the location of our place, Hong Kong, the import and exports no longer have to go through Hong Kong for entrepot. It was possibly because the shipping schedule were not as frequent in the mainland ports compared to Hong Kong, and therefore some of them had to pass through Hong Kong, and therefore the products bear the mark of made in Hong Kong, and maybe they were political reasons they had to route through Hong Kong, but that is no longer the case. So this textiles control system is almost meaningless. So as for the PL, the cut and sewn, and the application or registration, all these are not really necessary anymore. But rather, we should move with the times and with the economic situation to quickly do away with these controls altogether, so that manufacturers do not have to be hindered at procedural or paper procedures. So I would think the proposals made just now, in fact, we should go one step further, and that is to do away immediately with all controls, so that we move, or Hong Kong move together with the times globally. Mr. Chung Kwok Pan. As pointed out by Mr. Lam Tai Fai, the present textile export situation is as mentioned. But as mentioned by the administration, the reason why we want to retain this for the time being is because for countries such as the U.S., they may use certain pretexts to stop China export to the country, and may actually go through Hong Kong in an illicit way. So I think it is appropriate that we retain this for 3 years. And for the fee, to cut it down to $61 from $349, I think is appropriate. But how do we make the manufacturers retain their registration, continue to register? How can we make them do that? to have them say, all right, it is about $61, I will continue to register? How can we do that? Thank you, Mr. Chung, for the question. I think Mr. Lam was in support. The proposal that we raise now is really to, as soon as possible, do away with the system. But basically what we're trying to do is to leave some room for maneuver if in case there should be any importing countries which implements an embargo or a stop to export from China, then we do not want to affect the Hong Kong entrepot or export trade. That's all. Mr. Lam talked about 2005 abolition globally of the quota system. In fact, we could have relaxed the system even after then, but it was right after then that under WTO prerogative, the US and also European countries immediately slapped on controls, additional controls on China exports. And as a result of that, we continued with the control system in order to protect the benefits and the rights of Hong Kong textiles industry. So in the future, the system will be voluntary, that is the registration system. It has always been voluntary, actually, but there may be companies within the textile sector which say they would not even pay the $61 and not register. Yes, indeed, that can happen. So we are thinking up ways as to how we can encourage them and perhaps inform them early when the registration expires or just before it expires, and inform them that expiry is up, and also provide further and more direct information from perhaps by email from the Trade and Industry Department. And also the registration procedures will be highly streamlined. For instance, they can reply to our notification by email, or they can just fill in a very simple pre-printed form and send it back to us, and that would be fine. And also we would want them to also cut down on any logistical procedures in terms of payment of the $61 and also the filling in forms. Mr. Lau? Yes, I am in the trade. I have manufacturing concerns in Hong Kong, and I'm in import and export. Yes, this is very welcome in terms of streamlining of procedures, and also to retain this legislation. Well, in the backdrop of ever-changing world situation, anything can happen, really. So in order to balance exporters or manufacturers' interests in their application for quota or application for export, and also in providing the necessary environment for their operations, this is a balance. But how can you, in a timely manner, tell us what the US or Europe or some other markets are thinking or trying to do? How can you give us that kind of timely market information?
The TID will continue to monitor the economic development of the world, in particular that of textile. Our US ETO keeps a close eye on this, and also our office at the WTO. As soon as there is some development, we'll all be notified, and the traders, the textile traders, will all be notified as well. Mr. Wong Ting Kwong. Well, the quota is done away with, and you propose to dispense with the licensing as well. And I think all clouds are clear for our industry, because in the past it's a cumbersome procedure. When it comes to transshipment, you'll have to go through a lot of formalities and procedures, which is troublesome. Paragraph 14. Why is it reduced to $61? It's odd. Why not 60? What about $5? Don't be such a miser. Why is there a $1 there? Why not 60? Director. We calculate the fee level based on some factors. One of them is user pay principle. We will simplify the procedure. We work out the costs. And we have to calculate according to some government principles, and in the end it works out to be 61. It can't be 60 or 65. Well, you can just streamline the $1. It's quite odd. I understand that there is a formula that you have to stick to, and there are established procedures. But don't be so calcified. Please consider it. Do you have the discretionary power to change that? It would be better for everyone. And I see an odd dollar, just $1. The $1 can easily go lost. I don't have the discretionary power, but I will reflect your view to the Treasury. Let's see what they say. But I'd like to supplement that we will streamline the payment procedure as well. Now, I don't challenge you in this regard. I know you're doing really well. So we're thinking about accepting payments at say 7-Eleven. Yes, I do understand, and I understand that it's a significant drop from $349 to $61. It's just that $1 is odd. Mr. Sin Chung Kai. Well, I don't think it's a case that they are calcified. It's just that they stick to the principle, the user pay principle. I don't think people will carry cash with them when they're completing formalities and procedures. And if they do, that should be changed. And like Mr. Lam Tai Fai said, should it be a complete relaxation? Even if you propose a complete relaxation, I will support it, because this is outdated. We will support you with the legislative amendment. I need to declare, well, I engage in the textile industry, so I am very familiar with all these. I support the streamlining. Well, the quota system was dispensed with in 2005, and were past 2013, and you propose to dispense with the licensing requirement. You're talking about keeping certain things for 3 years. The voluntary registration scheme. How about allowing traders to pay and stay registered for 3 years in one go, and then give them a discount for the registration fee? Say, don't charge them $183 for 3 years. give them a discount so that they can be registered for 3 years. That would be better. The TTRS, the Textiles Trader Registration Scheme, according to the law, are subject to certain conditions. They have to have business registration that is valid every year, and they have to engage in the manufacturing, export, import, or related business. And they have to make an annual registration. If we allow them to register for 3 years in one go, we will have relaxed the requirement, because we don't know whether they are still registered under the business registry, and we don't even know whether they are still engaged in the textile industry. And that's why we don't want to change that. It's already the law. Next time in a review we will consider that. And this is only a suggestion. Director, you hear that there is a general support. Thank you for attending. Now there is an AOB. In the last meeting, the Deputy Chairman made a suggestion. In the policy address, there was a proposal to expand IP the IPD, and some members would like to visit the Intellectual Property Department. If you're still interested, maybe we will see whether they are available. Mr. Sin Chung Kai, don't count me in. I don't object to other people going. I have regular contact with the director, director of the IPD, so I don't need a visit. But if we get a date from the IPD and no one turns up, it will be really embarrassing. It seems that there is only a lukewarm response from members. Perhaps we can shelve it. And if there is an expression of interest in the future, we will revive this. There are no other business, so thank you for attending. Meeting adjourned.